Senator Roxas got the largest number of votes ever in a Philippine election. A staggering 20 million people chose him, and he's widely tipped to be presidential candidate in 3 years' time. Find out why this is an Asian politician to watch in my conversation with Senator Roxas of the Philippines. Roxas's journey into Philippine politics began in 1993 when he ran and won a seat in Congress. Before that, he was an investment banker in New York. The Wharton School of Economics graduate decided to follow his family's footsteps out of a desire to serve his country. His grandfather, after all, was the first president of the Third Republic of the Philippines in the late 1940s. His father was a senator in the 1960s. So it was perhaps but natural for him to join government service. But Roxas has made his own mark as a senator and a former trade and industry secretary by championing the cause of the average Filipino. He's become known as Mr. Palengke, or Mr. Market, for aiming to develop the wet market as a basic unit of progress in the economy. He has also pushed for cheaper medicine for the masses, quality education, consumer welfare, and more opportunities for small and medium-sized companies. Senator Roxas, thank you so much for joining me here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, Lynn.
Now, you've been described by the World Economic Forum, a very well-known, distinguished group of international businessmen and politicians, as one of the young leaders who is going to bring Asia and the Asia-Pacific into the forefront of world affairs.
There's an exaggeration in there somewhere, Lynn. Perhaps the whole phrase.
But, okay, what do you think you're doing that deserves such attention?
Well, this was accorded to me by the WEF a few years ago, and I was a new congressman, having just recently joined politics and government in my country. And I was very lucky to have been able to pass into law the Fair and Equitable Access to Education Act. And perhaps that was what caught their eye. What's important is that we created a formula so that by objective metrics, the funding for education in my country would be distributed all across the country fairly and equitably so that every school child would have an equal chance at accessing those funds. Historically, the monies for education were given out to include political considerations, partisan considerations, and ethno-linguistic considerations. So for something as precious, as valuable as education, it was really still part of the political patronage system. And a little bit of time after I joined government, I found this to be really not the right thing, and was able to gather consensus among my colleagues in the House of Representatives, and we passed it into law. And that gives me a great deal of satisfaction that some kid somewhere is going to be learning inside a classroom or will be learning from a book that otherwise that child would not have had access to had the law not been passed. So I think that was what caught their eye.
One of the difficulties, though, that the Philippines faces, I mean, definitely the economy has been picking up.
Well, it's not so much the economy is doing well. Financial markets are doing very well. The stock market is at a 10-year high. Peso-dollar exchange rate is quite strong in favor of the peso. Interest rates have come down substantially. And so all of the financial metrics are very, very positive. But these improvements in the financial markets really still has to be felt throughout the broader economy. Some of the indicia that I look at are, for example, electricity sales here in the Metro Manila area. Well, 04 to 05, 05 to 06, it still remains somewhat flat. And in fact, the increase is felt in the commercial sector, with industries with a slight decline and residential flat. So there really is not much indicator of increased industrial activity to reflect a stronger economy. Appliance sales is also quite down in 06 versus 05. And one of the key indicia I look for is refrigerator sales, because a purchase of a refrigerator indicates that a family can now buy in volumes in excess of daily hand-to-mouth existence. And
they're storing food.
That's right. They're now being able to store food. And that is also likewise down. This is notwithstanding $12 billion annually in 2006, that's the reported number, of remittances that have come from Filipino expatriates all over the world. So yes, there is a great deal of consumption spending that is fueled by this OFW money. But that notwithstanding, it really still has not translated into substantive economic activity all throughout the countryside.
So why is that not happening? I know that you're very interested in the sort of wet market, about prices at that ground level. Why is it we're not seeing this percolation down to ordinary people?
Well, I think that generally there's a governance issue. And people with capital, Filipinos with capital, prefer to lend to their government rather than to take that capital and start businesses here in our country. And the only explanation that I have for that is where they have a higher degree of confidence at a return as a lender rather than as an entrepreneur. Secondly is that the Philippine economy is really truncated at several levels. There's really very little economy of scale. You have a situation, for example, where vegetables coming from the growing areas will be sold by the farmer at about 6 pesos. Carrots, for example, will be sold at 6 pesos per kilo. And by the time it gets to Manila, 5 hours by road transport later, that 6 pesos per kilo is now 30 pesos per kilo. And it's really because of the number of hands or the number of middle agents that these products have to pass through. I find that very important, Lynn, because high food cost has direct impact to labor policy, wage policy, industrial policy, and so therefore education policy. If your food costs are relatively high, that means that your labor is going to demand a much higher wage rate, and so therefore you're going to have to be that much more productive in order to afford that higher wage rate, comparable to the neighbors here in Southeast Asia.
This issue, though, of simplifying things and making things easier for the little man, so to say, is also something you've taken up concerning medicine. Mm-hmm. It's been one of your champion sort of issues that you want to have cheaper medicine for ordinary people.
Well, this has been a long-time advocacy of mine. Both my father and my brother died of cancer. I found myself spending many, many hours in hospitals and in doctors' offices, and during that time, before I entered government, would talk to ordinary people and find out that really having this illness in their family, catastrophic illness, breaks their finances, and what was once middle class becomes poor class. And if you're poor, then you're just really up to praying, because while the medicines and the expertise is available, they're really just beyond their reach. And the examples here in the Philippines are quite stark. There's a medicine, for example, for high blood pressure, Norvasc, which here sells at nearly 45 pesos a tablet, which in India can be imported at about 5 pesos per tablet. So when I was given a chance to be in government and have something to do about it, it was one of my advocacies. I'm thankful to many of my counterparts in ASEAN, fellow ASEAN ministers. Giorgio, for example, when he was still Trade Secretary, was also very helpful here. Where in Doha and in Cancun, we were able to negotiate the TRIPS agreement that effectively allowed governments to gain access to affordable medicine.
Now, another aspect about Filipino politics that attracts attention, at least from outside, when you look at it, there's a sensation that perhaps it involves a lot of showmanship. There'll be coming up May elections, and there are several actors, I believe a famous boxer who's also running, precisely. What sort of effect do you think this has on the quality of Filipino politics?
Well, it certainly will have an effect, but I think it's also reflective of the state of people's aspirations. They see in these actors or the boxer people who have accomplished something, whether it is actual